What is going on, Peacemakers, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are breaking down Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 6, titled Ignorance is Chris, a perfect title to describe this episode. Now, this marks the return of James Gunn directing, and what a great episode to return on. Now, if you all have been watching my previous breakdowns, I've shared my thoughts about how I thought Lex Luthor was going to cameo in this season. I also thought that Earth X was going to be coming true, so the surprises didn't necessarily make me lose my mind, but it's still all about the execution, and I thought this episode finally had stakes, it had great tension, and we finally are going somewhere. So let's not waste any time and break it all down. Full spoilers ahead. Now, for the first time in weeks, we actually kick off this episode without a flashback. Instead, we see our Chris living it up in its other dimension as the top trio are celebrating at a restaurant for their recent big win against a kaiju, as we notice Harcourt is joining them as well. Everyone's happy and all smiles as we see a group of kids want to take a selfie with their heroes, but as the picture's taken, we notice their faces are all being distorted. To me, this distorted image is essentially Chris's mindset right now about how he thinks his universe is perfect. As we'll find out later, this universe is far from perfect, as this was a great setup for some foreshadowing for later. Meanwhile, back on Earth Prime, the remaining 11th Street kids are now at Adrian's place. Inside, they meet Adrian's mom, who loves her little boy, and she's so thrilled that he has friends over, at least for the first time since he used to play D&D. Now, Adrian treats his mother like a teenager who wishes their parents were invisible. And to give Adrian more fuel to be embarrassed by his mom, she tells Harcourt, as she calls her, that she was upset to learn that her and Adrian broke up. Now, this obviously completely catches Harcourt by surprise, as the reason they broke up was because of her lack of understanding how to make proper love. Now, inside Adrian's secret room, we see that he's basically a mini Heisenberg with millions of dollars of blood money and tons of drugs and also a Beanie Baby collection. Now, we watch as Ads activates a dimensional device, and in doing so, they get hit with a full-body cocaine baptism. But hey, at least it worked, as they open the quantum chamber and it's time to find Chris. They search for the right door in the chamber to find Chris, and lucky for them, I will admit there was a lot of conveniences in this episode, this being one of them. They don't waste much time in finding the correct door, and another convenience, Adrian knows the code as they enter the other dimension. Now, as they look around this Peacemaker house, we see Keith pops up and we see the others have to hide, and our Harcourt has to put on an act and kind of act a little bit more chipper than usual as she decides to take a ride to Argus with Keith. Now, meanwhile, John tries not to throw up because of how weird everything is, as Adrian is so determined to find his other self in this universe. Now, back in the car, we see Harcourt learns the greatest bands in this universe are the Beatles, led by Mick Jagger, and the other group by the name of the Halloweens, but Harcourt is taking notice of something more importantly, and that's that everyone that she sees in town is white. Now, at Argus, turns out that cocaine shower had lingering effects, as a K9 unit dog at Argus sniffs out Harcourt and they handcuff her, and just as that's happening, Chris walks in and sees all this going down. Now, this was probably one of my favorite scenes of this episode because it was just so damn funny. We're back with Adrian, who's having the time of his life, noticing all the differences he's finding from this dimension versus his dimension. He finds his house, and again, conveniently, keys he has to open his door, opens this universe's secret door, and inside, Adrian meets his doppelganger. Now, this Adrian doesn't immediately try to kill him like the Peacemaker did to our Peacemaker, but instead they share a very good laugh and they recreate the Spider-Man meme. But now let's switch gears from the comedy into a little political maneuvering. As we catch up with Rick Flag Sr., who is desperate to find Peacemaker, he sets up a sit-down with a prisoner in Belle Reve. Now, as we enter the prison, we see Flag awaits the prisoner, and it's someone walking up with a cane and a very bald head, and it's the one and only Lex Luthor. Now, like I said up top, I predicted Lex Luthor was going to cameo at some point, so it wasn't super surprising, but it was still great to see Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor in this rated R television show. It just goes to show how quickly the DCU is interconnected with movies and shows and animated and all the different stuff they have going so far. So again, it was great to see, but let's break down the actual scene here. Now, he shares with Flag his unpleasant experiences in being locked up so far, but he's even more upset to learn how metahumans like Superman and the Justice Gang are basically running things outside now. Now, after creating the dimensional rift in Metropolis, we find out that Lex Luthor was sentenced to 265 years in Belle Reve. But Rick Flag Sr. is here to offer him a transfer to a non-metahuman prison in exchange for his help. Now, Lex Luthor mentions having a scanner that can find the dimensional portal, and Flag says he will give Lex Luthor the opportunity for redemption. Now, Lex Luthor and Rick Flag Sr. come to an agreement, and he's going to be transferred to a non-metahuman prison by the name of Van Kull, which, if you all do not know, it's another popular prison within the DC Comics. As Rick Flag Sr. tells Bardo that they're now partners with Lex Luthor. Now, James Gunn himself a couple weeks ago said how this show, Peacemaker Season 2, will serve as a prequel to Man of Tomorrow, and this conversation 100% sounds like this is the way that Lex Luthor is going to finally break out of prison. With him going to a non-metahuman prison, I would imagine the security isn't as beefed up as Belle Reve. He also doesn't have to worry about metahumans stopping him and getting in his way or them having sex next door to his cell. But again, I feel like this is his way out. This is probably setting up a situation where he's going to help Superman and Man of Tomorrow take down, most likely, Brainiac, as the script that released a couple days ago kind of confirmed or at least suggests that Brainiac will be the main villain. And I just imagine Lex Luthor is just plotting to take advantage of this whole situation. As we know, Lex Luthor is definitely going to be playing the long game here. Now, my question is, will we be seeing Lex Luthor in next week's episode in the finale, or was this like a one and done cameo? My gut's telling me that we're going to probably see him one more time, but if not, again, this was a perfect way to set up how we're going to be seeing Lex Luthor operating with Argus when it comes to Man of Tomorrow. Now, back to the drama, Chris visits Harcourt, who is being detained. They exchange some heated words as Harcourt explains to him that she took him down last week to save his life, as we talked about in last week's breakdown. Now, as they continue the conversation, they clear up the air about some things as they talk about her and Rick Flag Jr. and how she once hated Chris because of what happened. But after what they experienced in saving the world in season 1, obviously things changed. Now, Chris admits to loving her and brings up the boat situation again, and she knows that he loves her, but she can't say it back, even if she did, because she tells Chris that she can't access her feelings like he does, as she calls herself a nightmare of a person. This was a really good emotional scene. I feel like this is something we've been waiting for from weeks, but it was good to kind of have them air all their laundry out. But even with all these cards now on the table, Chris still feels like he has to stay in this dimension. Now, back with our favorite doppelgangers from alternate dimensions, we see that the Adrians are practically identical except for this one thing. This dimension's Peacemaker absolutely hates his world's Peacemaker, and he has dedicated his life to tearing that Peacemaker down because, just like the comics, Peacemaker and Vigilante are arch enemies. Meanwhile, Az decides to take a walk outside while John stays behind and clean up Eagly's mess. Now outside, Az sees a white woman drive by and she nicely waves at her, but the woman in the car doesn't wave back. Instead, she looks at her and the look on her face says it all, pure disgust and hatred. Now back at the house, we see Agee returns and Harcourt returns to work while the other Harcourt is leaving Argus. Now while all this is going down, we see Harcourt mentions to Chris how she hasn't seen a single person of color since arriving. As that's happening, we see Keith driving back home and he sees Az walking in the street. He immediately stops and honks his horn to warn the neighbors that a black person has got out and they chase after her. Now him saying a black got out, to me sounds like they've captured all the black and all the brown people of this town. I don't know if it expands to like the entire universe, but I think in this town, it wouldn't surprise me if they led the charge. And by they, I'm talking about Keith and Agee, like they've gathered all the people of color in this town and have them hidden somewhere in the city. Now back at Argus, we watch as Chris picks up a flag on someone's desk and he sees a particular symbol, and we know what that symbol means, which indeed confirms what we talked about weeks ago, and that's that Chris is on Earth X. Now for those who aren't familiar, Earth X is a pretty dark place where Germany won World War II and the Nazis became the ruling power of the world. Now back at the house, John Economos is taken down by Agee, who puts a knife in his hand, and John, being John, unfortunately spills the beans on our Peacemaker, killing that dimension's Peacemaker. As our last scene shows us back at Argus, and Harcourt orders the guards to arrest our Harcourt. Meanwhile, we see Az is running in the streets for her life. Again, I can't stress enough, this was a fantastic episode of Peacemaker. And if you've been watching my reviews, I mentioned last week, This season, I wouldn't say disappointing is the word, but it has been very underwhelming. To get where we are in this point in the season, I feel like we could have expedited this process, if I'm being honest with you. But this episode, like I said, it had stakes, it had tension, it had some good comedy beats between the two Adrians, it had the big reveals, even though we saw it coming weeks ago. It all came down to the execution, and I think it helps that, James Gunn writes these scripts. Maybe not all the directors suit his sensibility as a writer, but him directing what he writes, it just plays out better to me. And I just thought that, again, this was the best episode of the season so far. And hopefully this leads into episode 7 being great and us having a great finale. Now, as far as other predictions I might have for the weeks ahead, I do predict Aglee's going to help John Economos get out of the situation. I have a feeling that someone might die from our universe, whether that be John Economos, whether that be Adrian or Ads. I think their lives are on the line. I hope none of them die, but if I were to pick someone from the crew dying, my money's unfortunately on John Economos. We also can't forget that Judo Master followed Peacemaker in this universe, so maybe my whole John dying might be debunked because in some weird way, maybe Judo Master might save John in this situation, or maybe he's the one who's going to die, Judo Master. But again, I just anticipate and I hope that things will have a good send-off for, like I said, a very underwhelming season. And also, as far as other cameos, I think it's safe to assume, because they were in a trailer, we're going to see Otis and the other scientists that we saw and was helping Lex Luthor in the Superman film. There's been very high rumors that we're going to see maybe Blue Beetle in the coming weeks. Maybe Harley Quinn might show up, or Bloodsport. But as far as big cameos, it wouldn't surprise me if we see the Justice Gang again, but them having maybe Supergirl pop up, or maybe even the Man of Steel himself in Superman. So with all that being said, that's going to be the conclusion of my breakdown of Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 6. Now, before we wrap up, I need to know what you all thought of this episode. What worked? What didn't work? Do you all predict other big cameos? Do you think any of our main characters are going to die? How do you think things are going to shake out in the weeks ahead? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Now, if you all have made it to this point in the breakdown, I want to thank you all so much. Do me a favor and put in the comments right now, #Spider-Man. Now, if you all appreciated this week's breakdown, do me a favor, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this in podcast, please consider hitting that like button. And when you do so on YouTube, you can also hit the hype button, which actually helps this video push out to new audience members. Which, speaking of, please consider sharing this video to anyone and everyone you know that love talking about Peacemaker. And last but not least, consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and also follow me on my podcast feed. All right, y'all. Thank you all for watching this week's breakdown. Don't forget, you all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll catch you all next week on Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 7.